today. Lalit Bhatt is the CTO at Entitle and has been at the forefront of designing both SaaS and AI-based applications in the industrial space for decades now. He's one of those industrial leaders who loves to get down in the trenches and has immense expertise in all the things related to installed base. Lalit has a phenomenal grip on technology and its applications for machinery manufacturers. When he's not at work, you'll find him posting some really interesting stuff around AI on LinkedIn and a bunch of other platforms. So with that, Lalit, let me hand it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, JW. And good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everywhere. So this topic was very interesting, and we're seeing a lot of interest on this one. So we thought that why not? Let's also put the business perspective in place. So we thought on the same line. So we thought that we'll bring Vivek also. So Vivek is the founder and CEO of Entitle, and I think it will be good to hear from him to get the base on which the Entitle was built and why the wallet share is so important for the machinery manufacturers. Vivek, maybe you want to kickstart the things and then we can continue.
Yes. Good. Like Lalit said, good morning, good evening. Welcome, everybody. Appreciate you all coming and joining today. We got a good gathering here. So I'm going to try to kind of set the framework for why we thought we'll start with the business side of things. So, just as a background, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Entitle. And really, part of the reason I started Entitle was when I was in your shoes, and almost predictably about this time of the year, at the planning phase, trying to figure out what the next year looks like. We're trying to look for easy sources of growth or less difficult sources of growth. And the obvious answer was, geez, let's go back to the aftermarket. Let's see what we can go dig into in terms of our wallet share and how do we go about trying to capture more wallet share and more market share in the install base. And that was always the case. And so that's kind of started with doing it. And then, I came across something or other, we read something, Lalit shared something with me recently about the fact that, we all care about customer experience, customer satisfaction, and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, customers express their satisfaction in the form of how much they buy from you, how often they buy from you, and so on and so forth. So the question is, are these independent? Are they mutually exclusive? No, the answer is related. But at the end of the day, as business people, we care about the wallet share and the money we make, right? So that's kind of a framework for how we think about this stuff. So coming back to what we want to get done out of today's event as business people and as technical folks as well, there's a couple out here who are technically oriented. In terms of trying to think about going to build targets for next year, for example, build targets for the next 2-3 years for the business, long-term and short-term planning, it's an important first step to set in terms of aftermarket, right? Being able to build that wallet share plan is important. But what we found time and time again is most companies really don't do a good job in keeping track of the part and component failure rates that are so critical and the foundational elements of building out the wallet share analysis. And so this calculation never gets done well. It's mostly approximate. So we've done some ways to we found some ways to get around this. We've built some other ways to build wallet share calculations and the predictive nature of things. And we've built it in a way that makes it easy for you to use for building and setting wallet share targets and metrics and going over time. Just a quick 30 seconds on these two slides that you see out here. Look, we all know that we've built this business around the notion of life cycle, right? We sell a machine, we sell an equipment, and over the next 15, 20 years, all of us benefit from the continued purchase from our customers of parts and consumables and services, be it service contracts and so on and so forth. And those are really valuable recurring revenue opportunities. And the transactions can be many over time. We've done some analysis with some of our customers that says as many as 8 to 10x the number of transactions annually, depending on what kind of product you're selling for our customers, for a user. And that's going to be pretty valuable. So the question is, what do you do about it? And how do you do about it? How do you go about it is really important. And so when you go back to the planning discussion and why is wallet share important? One of the foundational reasons I started Entitle is that when I was in your shoes, when I was an operator and I was trying to build out this plan for next year, I used to see time and time again, I was not getting my fair share of the potential out there. So if you think of the word entitle, it comes from the word entitlement. I was trying to get my sales and service people to go after my install base and figure it out. And the question always to me was, okay, Vivek, what do I do? Who do I go call? And why do I do it? And that's what led us this framework of wallet share analysis, try to understand it. And in some cases, some companies will call it entitlement gap, right? So we're trying to understand entitlement gap. And this framework, this visual literally shows you very simply how this thing comes about. And so really at some level, We know we are getting 30%, $30 of every 100 that potentially the customer spends, or we think so. And the question then becomes, well, how do you really understand, is it $30 or $20 or $40? And more importantly, then how do you identify the leftover stuff, the $60, $70, $80 that you should go after? That's really the end of the day. The wallet share analysis is meant to drive action. It's not meant to do analysis for the sake of analysis. So that's kind of what this business context is about. And when I was again, long time ago, when I was in an industrial company, we were very much into what I would call mission critical products, be it jet engines, locomotives, and turbines, and so on and so forth. So our engineers and our reliability people did a really, really good job, including the supply chain folks, a good job in terms of trying to understand what I would call failure rates or replacement rates or service intervals, because we really needed to track these well. And so because we had a pretty good grip on critical components, critical aspects of the product, we were able to calculate wallet share. So we'd look at things like failure rates, consumption rates, replacement intervals, and so on and so forth, and build out this little table. We used to call it duty cycle table, right? So that was the way to kind of do it in a systematic manner because we had that data. But you know what? We've seen every single customer we worked with, almost nobody has a really good ability to build this, what I would call a duty cycle table for either a class of products or a class of parts or for a class of products, a basket of parts, right? So this thing tends to be a big problem, right? People don't really have that data available. And if the data is there, reliability data is kind of hidden in some lab somewhere, right? And certainly in the supply chain, people don't ask these questions. So it's a problem. So without this granular information and knowledge about the aftermarket, machine performance or component performance, you really can't build a good wallet share calculator. You can't really build a wallet share picture. And then what happens is what we've seen time and time again, which is, people say, you know what, this stuff's too difficult. I can't do it. I'm going to wait. I'm going to let people, let just customers call me, right? So that's unfortunately the default stream you see. And then that allows your customers to go somewhere else and your competitors to go win share. We think there's a better way. And now with that, I'm going to hand over back to Lalit because Lalit's going to now take you to the granular details of what better way there is out there. So Lalit, I'm going to also give you remote control access and you already have it. So have at it.
Okay. Thanks, Vivek. Thanks to setting up the background and the business need of the things, because at the end of the day, whatever we do as part of analytics is basically a means. It's basically a means, and the end is basically like, can we make more money on that one, as Vivek has pointed out in the initial slide. I think at the end of the day, it's how much wallet share we can capture back. So if you have duty cycle, as Vivek has pointed out, I think you are seeing here like one of the screenshot of our platform, install-based platform. But then you can capture that and use that one. That is like a very straightforward way of doing that one. Then you can just figure out the rhythm in which the purchase need to happen. But again, I think time and again, I would say that almost in 100% of the cases, we don't see. In 100% of the cases, we really don't see that reliability data available. Then what we need to do is that we need to now depend on algorithms, AI analytics, these kind of things. And these data are not small data sets. Like whatever we have worked with, these are like very giant industrial OEMs who had data running in for decades, actually, at some time, a huge amount of transaction data, a lot of equipment sitting out in the market. But essentially, if we talk about wallet share, what we have figured out is that essentially it's a two-step process. In the first step, what you do is that among all the equipments that are sitting out in the market, you try to figure out a cluster. And what is that cluster? The cluster is about the equipments that are behaving in the same way. We will later look into the presentation, some of the ways to look into and how to do clusters. And then essentially, once we have the cluster in place, figure out the parts, and for each part, we try to figure out the purchase rates. Purchase rates or consumption rates, it goes with different names, but basically we figure out that rhythm in place. And once we have that, we have an idea of that rhythm, we can apply it to all the equipments across the cluster. And that helps us in figuring out the wallet share, that helps us in figuring out who are our best performing customers, who are underperforming customers, and that gives an idea itself. In fact, in simple terms, it becomes a hunting list for the sales team to go after now. So what is a purchase rate? essentially, I think this is again, I'm sure to this group to explain that one is like, this is something someone in this group, I'm sure is very, very familiar with. But essentially what we do is that we look into the whole transaction history, and then we try to figure out that for a given part against a given machine, what is the pattern of buying or of consumption we are seeing. So there's just some sample purchase rates, like it could be, they could be buying at a higher frequency, they could be buying at a lower frequency, or they would not be buying at all. Of course, these sine or whatever cost curves look very smooth, but in real life, that doesn't happen. But again, there are statistical techniques where we can still figure out those things, and we will touch on that as well. So now, as we have discussed about clusters, so the thing is that, as we talked about that, it's a two-step process. The first step is to find the cluster. How do we find the cluster? How do we find the equipments which are behaving in the same way? Because it's important to benchmark among themselves. We can't benchmark, even though two equipments are the same model type, but if they're running in a very, very different conditions, they are not the ideal candidates to be benchmarked against each other. And when we talk about clustering, it could be very simple at times. For example, like cycles of operations. So some of the machines, like if you take an example, like medical equipments, which are probably put in a very, very controlled condition. So whichever part of the world you go, they will be probably sitting in a very, very controlled condition, behave in the same, would be exposed to the same sort of climatic environment. So there we can have like a little simpler way of clustering them. We can say that like they're probably at the same cycle levels, we can cluster them together. But it can become little more complex. It could be like the geographic conditions making a difference. So like chillers, these kind of equipments, which the performance of them would be very, very different depending on whether it's a desert area or they are probably in a cooler climate. And it doesn't even stop here. It might be even the third dimension can come into picture. For example, here in this example, like even the industry segments, how it is getting used in different industry segments might make a difference. But fundamentally, what we are looking after is how we can cluster them. And we can have n number of sort of dimensions that can come into picture that can help in finding us that cluster out. But it is very, very important to get that clustering right in place, because that would drive a lot of downward calculation. And in fact, how good we are in terms of the accuracy of the calculation, that depends a lot on how we are figuring out our clusters. There are other aspects to that one. These are more of details. I just listed them out. I'll not get into that one. But the basic idea to take here is this whole notion of clustering. So once we have a cluster in place, I think the next important thing that becomes important now is, as we have talked about, the purchase rates. So how do we figure out purchase rates? So again, like what I'm putting here is a very, very simple model for the understanding. Basically, it can become more complex out there. But if we see here, what we are doing here is that we have a set of machines, and we are saying that these all machines belong to one cluster. And then we have a set of parts. And let's focus just on the part P1. And for the P1, what we are saying is that what we have figured out, looking at the transaction history of that part against each of the machine, we have figured out their intervals. It could be purchase intervals, consumption rate. So it goes by different name, but essentially what we are figuring out is the rhythm with which that part is being purchased. And again, like a little word of caution here, these diagrams looks very smooth. In real life, it doesn't happen. But still, if we look into that data, we'll be able to draw certain patterns, certain rates out of that one against each machine. And then what we can do is that we can actually put those different rates in the cluster in a, this is very interesting. I think usually all of these data, if the data size is really, really large, you realize that it will actually fall into some sort of normal distribution curves. And once we have that in place, the things become much easier now. Now we would know that in that spread, what is the minimum intervals in which people are buying, what are the max ones, what are the medians, what are the 90 percentiles. So usually what we have seen working with multiple customers is somewhere between, let's say, 75 to 90 percentile, based on the nature of that industry and things like that. We usually see that that purchase rate can be taken as a benchmark for that particular cluster. Now, once we have the benchmark is placed, the other things becomes much easier. If you see that the machine that is, let's say that if the benchmark is somewhere here, we know that any machine which is on the left side of the things, we are leaving wallet share on the table. And that means that definitely gives us a directionality in terms of where we are losing the money. And that itself now actually helps us in creating pipelines and campaigns and hunting list kind of things. So this is one way to look into that. And I'll just, again, like these things can be done in multiple ways. I'll just give another example also, which is on a simple duty cycle kind of thing, just to give that idea better. But again, let me be very clear that underlying even in this model, it's the purchase rate that works. It's just that it goes to the next level. So for example, like we talked about when machines are like sort of in a similar kind of environment, and then let's say we have the duty cycle information. In that case, what happens is that let's suppose that this machine is here and we want to figure out it's today, and we know that it has somewhere between 5 million to 6 million that machine is sitting, and we want to figure out that what kind of part consumptions or services this machine would be needing. So what we can do is that we can look into all the other machines that have gone through this cycle. So for example, like I put some machines in red here. These machines essentially on today might be, let's say someone might be at 7 million, someone might be at 12 million. But these machines at some point in the past would have gone through this cycle. And that gives us a good handle in terms of what kind of part needs, what kind of consumables need, or what kind of service needs these machines need when they actually go through somewhere, let's say between 5 million and 6 million cycles of things. Once we have that in place, again, you would see that the diagram is pretty similar to that one. It's just that now we have converted it into more in terms of basically the quantities consumed. And again, let me again reiterate that underlying it's still the purchase rates that is working. It's just that we have now abstracted it at one higher level. But again, the idea then goes in the similar way. You now know that given all the machines that are in that cluster, in this case, that had gone through that cycle in the past, would all have consumed, in this case, let's say we are taking the example of part 2, would have consumed these kind of quantities. And then once we have this in place, I think the other job becomes much easier, as we have talked about, like 90 percentile or 75 percentile based on the nature of the industry. And when we subtract with the actual consumption for that particular machine, that gives us the entitlement gap. So that is how the whole thing flows. Again, like if we just recapture everything, it's a two-step process. First, figure out your clusters. How do you figure out a cluster? Each industry, the type of equipments, what kind of parameters that impact their functioning would drive how the clusters would be formed. And then figuring out their part consumption rate in some way. Basically, you have to figure out the notion of a part consumption rate. So for example, here in the example, in one case, we saw actual part consumption rate. In another example, we actually worked at a higher level and looked into the quantities of a given part. So yeah, so I guess hopefully that gives an idea on the things. And once those calculation in place, I think that's where we can now circle back what Vivek pointed out to. He began with essentially what we want to do, why we want to do these calculations, so that we can do, we can create campaigns, we can do predictions, and basically drive our wallet share. This is just a small dashboard with just an example actually that we did for a similar kind of things we did for our customers. Here you can see that for a given customer name and number and which part, basically we figured out what is the benchmark quantity, what they have already consumed, and then this is the gap quantity, which actually becomes the which represents the wallet share. And again, the bigger the wallet share, of course, like it also helps in figuring out where the where there is maximum ROI in terms of efforts to be aligned. So and again, it's like more details on that one. As part of that one, like now you can track these as an opportunity and track their different stages on that front. Before I close on this one, I think this is also very, very important. One of the most important things we have seen is that it's the data quality. In fact, it's very interesting that when in the initial days of the Entitle, we even never thought like it's sort of we thought the data quality is given, and we were just focusing on this wallet share algorithms, and we thought that we will get data basically from our customers, which would be very, very clean. But very, very soon we realized that no, that's not the case. In fact, that is one of the very important things that we need to put in place before we can do even any sane analysis over the data. So that has led us to actually do a lot of work on tools, developing tools as part of the platform so that the data quality is taken care of. In fact, like our the main platform, installed base platform, one of the major element where we see that the whole thing falls in place in terms of all analytics and AI is because of this data quality. The other thing to basically take care of is that not to boil the ocean. Generally, we try to become too much accurate about things. We try to even form closed form equations, but in real life, the data, you'll find a lot of gaps in data. The data would not have that kind of rhythm. So it's important, and I think that's where this all precision and recall comes into picture. That figure out, target certain level of accuracy, go and try it out, and then refine your models. So it's very important that look out for your marginal benefits, because beyond certain point, actually the ROI will start decreasing a lot for such kind of algorithms. And again, I think I've said again and again, I think it's very, very important to get the correct clusters, and that would, again, you may not even get it at the first place. So that is a feedback loop that needs to keep running, that needs to keep refining it. And the other, this is a practical problem we have seen, is that usually, like, it's easy to say that the machine is there and this is the number of parts you have consumed, but mostly we have seen that that data doesn't exist. There is no relationship between how, so for example, one customer might have 5 equipments of similar type and sold 5 parts. So we don't know, it is like 1 part to each machine or all 5 parts to one machine. So we have seen that a better proxy to cluster around customers. But yes, once you take care of this one, that's what we have seen in real life. The returns are amazing, basically. So yeah, I guess I think I'll close it here. JW, I think over to you. If you have any questions, we can definitely take that up.
Awesome. Thank you, Lalit. You want to move ahead one slide quick?
Sure.
Thanks. Just wanted to put in a quick note to you folks on the call. We have our industrial playbook here with a QR code to scan if you would like to get some access to it. There are dozens of use cases here with many of the OEMs that we've worked with for years now, and would definitely highly recommend you check it out. So with that, we'll move over to questions for Lalit and Vivek. We got a couple in, guys. The first one, how long does it take to do one of these exercises?
That's a very interesting question, and it is actually 2 dimensions to it. It's not just about the time. In fact, there are a couple of dimensions, to put it that way. First thing is to get the data story in place. That itself, we have seen that if you try to do on yourself, it takes a huge amount of effort. Then it also depends on the amount of data out there, and we have seen that, like, where industries have tried to do in themselves, it takes, like, I would say, even a year plus kind of thing, and even it will require different kind of skill sets. But yes, that's what we have now figured that out. We have put institutionalized everything in place, and usually we have seen that in 8 to 10 weeks we are able to bring, like, start getting the first set of results for our customers.
You know, can I clarify something that Lalit said? I think there are 2 different answers that Lalit gave you, right? One is when we see customers who are trying to do it on their own, because they've never done this enough times or they've never done this before, the act of getting the data prepared is extraordinarily painful and difficult and time consuming. And we've seen companies take as much as 2 to 3 years to do a massive data prep exercise, which candidly is just is a buzz killer, to say the least, right? It just is, by that time, some people have changed jobs, you know, the focus has changed and so on and so forth. So that's point number 1. Point number 2, when Lalit talked in his real life slide about data quality is important and we focus on it, you know, we fundamentally realized that without data, without clean data, you're never going to get the right information there, never get the right results. And so we've developed a huge amount of technology for data prep that allows us to drop these timelines to 8 to 10 weeks. In the case of some very large customers, it's taken us as much as 4 months, which is 15 to 16 weeks. But then we're talking about 100 million records from 7, 8 different systems, reconciling them, cleansing them, deduplicating them, enriching them to make sure they're usable, and then running the algorithms to understand these clusters and segments and the duty cycle analysis and so on and so forth. So, I think it's just dependent who you are. If you do have a team in your company that has done a ton of data work, so what I would call more data engineering work, then you should be able to do it faster. But we've traditionally never seen too many companies with that skill set available. So hopefully that clarifies that answer, JW.
Yes, thank you. I got one more for you too, Lalit. What's the accuracy on something like this?
So accuracy is basically what we have seen is that I think it's definitely not 100%. And what we have seen is that it varies. Like we have seen, and what I'm saying is that it's like a little bit of statistical accuracy in terms of like matrices like recall and precision kind of thing. But it varies, and it also depends on the quality of the data, how sparse the data is, how many years worth of data is available to us. But we have seen in good cases, even if it's going like, if I talk in terms of recall and precision, even it goes like 70-80% kind of thing. But we have seen other sides of the things where the accuracy is pretty low, but usually the underlying reason is bad data, sparse data, and not enough data.
Got it. Thank you. All right. Well, I think we are good to wrap up if no other questions for the time
one
being.
more. I see something in the Q&A. I can't click on it because there's something wrong with my thing. Is that the question you just asked? Okay.
From Sam, and FYI, this whole exercise is irrelevant if the equipment is covered by a comprehensive service contract.
Yes. But Sam, what I'd say back to you in rebuttal is that the percentage of equipment covered in service contracts is pitifully low for most companies. And so while your answer is correct, unfortunately, in practice, we don't see that as often as we would like. And in fact, I'd argue that even when people cover service contracts, there are very few comprehensive service contracts that what I want to call the all-you-can-eat parts in service contracts. So, people still have to sell those things. They still don't know what's happening. They're still responding to breakdowns. And so, I think in theory, it's good. In practice, we're not seeing it exist too much. And maybe you've seen a different set thing, Sam. So love to talk to you about that one day.
Yeah, and to add to Vivek, actually, what we have also realized that even company gets surprised once we bring their data back in the number of equipment they don't even know about that exist in the market. Leave apart service contract.
Yeah, but good point, Sam. All right, JW, anything else?
Thank you. No other questions in at this time. So with that, I think we're right on schedule to wrap up the event for the day, folks. Appreciate your attendance. Please reach out to myself, Vivek, Lalit, or Entitle as a whole with any other questions or comments for us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Good
you.
day, good
Thanks.
evening. Bye-bye.
Good evening.